The Sunni Muslim Observer. It's by Dr. Raja King.
Okay, yeah, I've heard of this one. Looks like it takes current events and analyzes them from the perspective of.
Sunni Islam? Yeah,
Sounds interesting. I'm curious to see what kind of unique perspective it brings.
me too. It seems to really contrast, uh, how those outside the faith are all about, material things.
Materialistic pursuits. I've definitely heard that kind of comparison before. The spiritual versus the material.
Yeah, and the book really digs into some specific examples that Dr. King labels as oppression. Like he talks about the Uyghur Muslims in China.
Right, and the conflict in Kashmir. Those are
Yeah.
definitely situations that have garnered international attention.
He even brings up the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which has been going on for,
It's a complex and long-standing conflict with a lot of historical baggage.
exactly. As you won't believe this, but he even connects things like Trump's reelection and the whole electric car situation, how Chinese electric vehicles are dominating in Germany.
Oh, wow. Okay, so he's making some pretty bold connections there. Interesting that he sees those events as tied into this global,
Struggle.
yeah, I guess you could call it that, this clash between a focus on material gain and, well, I suppose the spiritual focus that he sees Islam as offering.
It definitely makes you stop and think.
Echo that.
There's something about this pursuit of material wealth that leads to, well, these kind of outcomes, the
Yeah.
conflicts and suffering, especially for Muslims globally.
That's a big question, and I think that's exactly what Dr. King is trying to get at. He presents Islam as like a different way.
A path that's focused on spiritual growth and finding that guidance.
Right. And it seems like he really believes that Islam offers the correct guidance, the correct way to live your life.
He talks about reaching paradise and all that. And actually, the book spends a good amount of time on the soul. Like the soul's more important than the physical body.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that. There was that whole argument about sudden death in healthy people, right?
Right. He uses that to say, look, there has to be this spiritual side to us, a soul that faces judgment.
So it's not just about living a good life here, but preparing for what comes after.
Exactly. He's basically saying worldly success, all those things we chase after might not be what really matters in the end.
Really puts things in perspective, huh?
It does. And that's what I think is so interesting about this book. It forces you to think about how different belief systems shape how we understand, everything. Global events, our purpose in life.
It's true. Our beliefs become like a lens through which we view the world.
And if those lenses are different, well, it makes sense that we might approach finding solutions to global problems in totally different ways, too.
For sure. So, after diving into the Sunni Muslim Observer, what really struck you? What part of this perspective resonated most?
I think for me, it was that emphasis on finding meaning beyond just, material success. In a world facing so much uncertainty, that idea really hits home.
I totally agree. And, whether or not you agree with everything Dr. King says, it definitely raises some important questions like, how do you define a life well lived? Where do you find meaning when the world seems to be, well, kind of a mess?
That's something for everyone listening to think about. From the Journal of Islamic Psychology and Islamic Philosophy.
Okay.
And it just came out, last week on November 19th, 2024. But the thing is, this article is making some pretty wild claims.
Oh, what?
Well, it's saying that, ultimate success, it just doesn't exist, not within the scientific understanding of the universe anyway.
That's a bold statement for sure.
Right. And their reasoning. It's because, well, the universe itself is basically on a one-way trip to oblivion.
I mean, that is kind of the ultimate end, isn't it?
It is. And it's kind of freaking me out, to be honest, this whole heat death thing, It just makes you wonder, if even the universe has an expiration date, what does that mean for how we should be living our lives?
Yeah, it really makes you question things, doesn't it? It's like, what's the point of it all if everything eventually just fizzles out?
Exactly. And that's where this article gets super interesting. It takes this, really heavy scientific concept of the universe's inevitable end.
Right.
And it connects it to this deeply human question. What does it even mean to live a successful life?
It's a pretty fascinating link, I've got to admit.
I know. And they even go there, talking about the sun eventually becoming a red giant.
Oh, wow.
Which, let's be real, is a pretty terrifying thought if you really let it sink in.
Yeah, it's not exactly a cheery image.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
We're talking the sun expanding so much, it engulfs the earth.
Like swallows it whole.
Gone.
Gone.
And that's just our little corner of the universe.
Yeah.
On an even grander scale, the universe itself is winding down, losing usable energy, and heading towards this state of, well, they call it heat death, where everything is just kind of spread out and evened out.
Yeah, maximum entropy, everything in equilibrium, no more potential for change or work.
Okay, see, now you're using the big science words.
Well, it's a big concept. But yeah, that's the idea. The universe slowly spreading out, cooling down until there's no energy left to do anything, even exist.
So it's like, even if we somehow manage to escape the sun swallowing us up,
Right.
everything's just doomed anyway. Everything we build, achieve, it's all temporary in the grand scheme of things.
On a cosmic scale, yeah, it's all fleeting.
And that's what I'm struggling with. Like, does that negate everything, all our efforts, everything we strive for? How does this article even reconcile that with the concept of success?
Well, hold on tight, because this is where things get really interesting. The article makes a pretty bold claim, and it might surprise you. They suggest that the answer to this whole existential dilemma lies within Islam.
Islam. Okay, now I'm really intrigued. I mean, how does a religion tie into the universe ending?
Well, they're basically contrasting the temporary nature of material success, within this finite universe.
Okay, so like all the stuff we usually think of as success, money, fame, power.
Exactly. They're contrasting that with the concept of eternal paradise offered by Islam. It's like they're saying that in the face of inevitable cosmic death, the only true and lasting success can be found through spiritual pursuits.
So it's not about what we achieve here on Earth, because that's all going to disappear eventually anyway.
Right. It's about aligning yourself with divine guidance, with Allah, and striving for a reward that exists outside of this physical universe.
I mean, that's a pretty powerful perspective.
It is, and it really challenges how we typically think about success. Like, if you really believe that this material world is temporary, then maybe it makes sense to focus on something that transcends it.
So are they saying that everything we achieve in this universe is ultimately meaningless then? Like all our accomplishments, our art, our relationships, poof, gone.
Well, that's the perspective the article puts forward. It's pretty heavy stuff. And they even go so far as to say that Islam is the correct guidance.